Alrighty, Wolfpack, we are back for the third time in 2 weeks. We got our guy, Trevor Sikkema from the Draft Network, also covers the Bucks over at the Pewter Report. You can find him at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter. Loves interacting with everybody. He's a great follow if you don't follow him already. Fantastic stuff for rookies, for the Bucks, and all football in between. Trevor, thanks so much for coming back on. How are you, man?
Of course, man. Always enjoy talking with you, so it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll get right into the fantasy stuff because the draft is over. Tons of exciting stuff has happened. You gave us a fantastic preview of everybody, but now that we actually know all the landing spots, the fits, the coaching scheme they're going to be in, it's even that much more valuable to hear your takes on what these guys will be bringing to their offenses and what type of impact you see them having in year one. So let's go right in. Start at the top with number one overall pick, and that's Kyler Murray. Going to the Cardinals, he's going to be engineering Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense. What do you see about this? I mean, they go out and also add three wide receivers in Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keyshawn Johnson. So what do you think Murray's going to be doing in Arizona? What are your expectations for year one?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the fantasy point right when they drafted Kyler Murray, because I was thinking about, oh man, am I going to be drafting Kyler Murray in fantasy? He actually, I mean, you got to think it's a pretty good play, right? I mean, they traded Josh Rosen. There is no other quarterback on the roster who is going to really challenge Murray at all, and I think that the thing that makes him really alluring is that he's going to do a lot of damage with his legs, right? And so anytime you get that benefit, people who do fantasy see that with Cam Newton, of course, they saw it with Colin Kaepernick, guys like that who can really win with their legs, more importantly, scoring touchdowns with their legs. That's a really big point to why Kyler, I think, would be a really alluring fantasy pick, because I think you're right. Certainly the Cliff Kingsbury offense, in theory, you're going to be like, oh, they're going to put up a lot of points. The biggest X factor there is not even going to be Kyler Murray. I think it's going to be that offensive line, right? But to that point, if the offensive line isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, he's going to have to go off script a bunch, and that includes him running around with his legs, getting some extra yards, scoring some touchdowns with his legs too. And so I think Kyler Murray becomes a pretty dang strong fantasy play as long as that guy's going to stay healthy. I think he'll get you a lot of points.
Absolutely. The leg points will be huge. You brought the point up I was going to make with that line. He's going to be scrambling for his life quite a bit between that patchwork line. And I think he's the ideal kind of QB2. If you get like a Philly Rivers, somebody you're getting 4,530 from, give me that upside of Kyler Murray. Because I do think this offense, we had a great interview with a WSU coach who's been coaching the air raid for years now. And he loves Murray. He thinks he's going to be able to sling it all over the place in this offense. He played under Kingsbury, this guy Drew Hollingshead we had on, and he was all about this fit, all about the weapons they added. And speaking of those weapons, you have Larry Fitz and Christian Kirk already there, but then they add Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keyshawn Johnson. So how do you see that shaking out? Do you have a favorite of that bunch?
I mean, my favorite would be Hakeem Butler. He was my wide receiver 2 going into the draft. And so, if the Ravens had picked Hakeem Butler at number 22 or wherever they were drafting, that would have been a good pick for me. If the Steelers would have picked Hakeem Butler at number 20, if they would have stayed at 20, that would have been a good pick for me. But I thought it was crazy that this guy lasted all the way to the first pick of day 3. I've got to think that his impact on that Cardinals receiving room especially is going to kind of be felt right away. And then Isabella's interesting because they do have Christian Kirk. And, if you're doing really early fantasy drafts, you're going to be going back and forth wondering how much each of those guys is going to take away from one another, because they are more speedsters, separation guys. They're going to play in the slot. And so in theory, you could convince yourself, hey, they're going to get a lot of a workload. They're going to get a lot of targets because Murray's going to be trying to get that ball out of his hand pretty quick, even in the air raid offense. But, if you have the time, I'd wait for it to see how it plays out in training camp. I think you'll get a little bit better of a look to see, hey, which wide receiver's playing where, which one's becoming his go-to thing. Because the thing is, Kirk can play on the outside too. Kirk can be a speed guy on the outside. I don't know if that's going to be Isabella, but I also don't know if they're going to want Kirk to do that long-term. So he might just be a rotational slot guy along with Isabella, which you never really want from a fantasy perspective. You want those guys who are going to take a large carry load, a large target load, something like that. And so there's high potential, I think, with both of those two receivers, but Butler, I think, is a pretty safe bet for a guy that's going to have a pretty good impact year one. Isabella's the one where it's like I could see it, but you got to kind of wait a little bit to see.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw the quote either by Kingsbury, but it was something along the lines of Butler wanted to play at Texas Tech, and he passed on him, didn't give him a scholarship, and he called him up and said right before they drafted, "I'm not making that mistake twice. We're going to have you in this." Yeah, so it's good stuff. I'm excited for what Butler can bring to the table, 6'5" and 4'4", 840. It's going to be exciting stuff. The position that most often has that impact in year one, for fantasy-wise at least, is most often running back, and right at the top of the draft, you said, last week that Josh Jacobs was your number one guy. He lands in probably the most open backfield, and that's especially true with Isaiah Crowell tearing his Achilles in practice today. So at this point, there's really no one in his way. I mean, Jalen Richard can catch the ball a little bit in Oakland, but right now it's looking like Josh Jacobs, your number one back, is set for workhorse load. You said you thought he could handle it before. What's your expectations now in this landing spot for him?
Yeah, I didn't think that he would necessarily be thrust this much into it with no backup, but like you said, man, I mean, like, this is now his backfield with no Crowell there. I think they said they were bringing back Doug Martin, but how much do you trust Doug Martin really? And so I've got to think that as you're drafting rookies early, he's not a guy that you want to prioritize as much as say like Saquon Barkley you did last year or anything like that, but. Yeah, getting running back in today's age when it comes to there's tons of running backs by committees. There's all these kinds of split carries, split targets. You never know who's going to get what. Jacobs, because he is such a good 3-down back, he makes sense as a guy that you prioritize high because they don't have to take this guy off the field. Now, will they? I'm not sure. We'll have to see how much they really want to give this rookie a workload, but in terms of like in theory, how much could they give him? Sky's the limit. This guy can pass block. He can pass. He can catch out of the backfield, and of course, we know what he can do when he has the ball in his hands when he's a true running back too. So, in theory, this guy can play all three phases of running back, and so it looks like a pretty good draft.
Absolutely, yeah. He's easily the top rookie in my opinion, at least for redraft purposes right now. And yet, like you said, I mean, sky's the limit for touches. We'll see what they want to do with him, but I imagine they're not going to want to look dumb for trading away all those players. I think they're going to ride their guy. We'll see. But after him, David Montgomery seems to be the next best back with a lot of opportunity. Could potentially take a featured back style role under Matt Nagy. We've seen him ride 3-down horses before. Rode a bit of a committee last year, but that was probably a product of, Jordan Howard can only run. Tarik Cohen really is much more of a pass catcher. Now he gets a guy who he's already come out and said, this is a 3-down back. Do you buy that? And these comparisons, a lot of them getting tossed out to Kareem Hunt, who he used to have as a rookie. What's your opinion of Montgomery? How does he stack up to him? And do you like this fit with the Bears here?
I love the fit with the Bears. I do. I'm weary of him referencing Montgomery as a 3-down back for fantasy purposes because certainly you hear that term and you're looking for fantasy advice. You go, oh, okay, this guy, like they're going to give this guy the ball all the time. He's going to be a workhorse. I don't totally believe that. Like, I think this guy, he's going to be their power guy. He's going to get goal line touches. I think he's going to get the touchdowns that you want. But Cohen is still going to be heavily involved in this offense. And so even if they might like David Montgomery in all three phases of the running back game, and even though I do think that he's going to serve some fantasy purposes because I think he is going to be their power guy, I just can't see – I can't see him being like this total 3-down back kind of a player. So that's kind of where I am with him. I think he has the ability to, but in terms of, hey, the coach saying we're going to use him all the time as like a workhorse role, that part I can't really believe.
Sure. And what kind of skill set, though, is he bringing to this team, would you say?
I think that – so Montgomery is a guy who – I think he led college football in most forced missed tackles. And so, like, this is a guy who's going to get you a decent amount of yards after the catch, yards after carries as well. So anytime he's in either of those games, you can always count on him to get you some extra yards. He's a tough runner. He's a really physical runner, and that's why I think he plays a complementary role to what Tarik Cohen does. Yeah. So that's why I think that he's going to get on the field early. I just don't know if it's like to that extent where it's like, oh, we're playing this guy in all three phases because they already showed you what Tarik Cohen can do. I mean, he's an electrifying player, and everybody's always looking to hit the home run, so he's going to get plenty of touches as well. So that's kind of where I see his role and why I think that maybe short yardage stuff, goal line stuff, I think that Montgomery's going to get a crack at it just because he's so well at making guys miss and getting yards after contact, but I still think Tarik Cohen's going to be the main guy in the receiving game.
Absolutely. I agree with that too. I've seen some reports already saying they expect Cohen's carries to go down. They might split him out more wide too. So that could be interesting if both guys are on the field at the same time, style offense. And Nagy's a creative guy, so I'm very intrigued to see. They had very limited draft capital. They go and trade up to go get this guy. Clearly they must love him, and I'm very intrigued to see what carves out for David Montgomery. He's probably my second pick in a rookie draft after, of course, Josh Jacobs right now. But after them, the last running back I kind of want to discuss, and maybe we'll see if you have any sleepers here, is Miles Sanders. He's actually the second guy that gets drafted, even though I might like Montgomery more. He was the second running back off the board for Philadelphia. And on paper, I don't love the fantasy fit because Pederson's always been a big committee guy. They just trade for Jordan Howard, so what's his role as well? But should I be more excited? Why would the Eagles go and get this guy? And how do you see him being used here?
Yeah, I actually really like Miles Sanders' fit in Philadelphia. I just don't know how many carries he's going to get. That's kind of like a wait-and-see game. So for everybody who's doing fantasy drafts early, you're really rolling the dice with Sanders just because I think, like you said, like you mentioned, the running backs that are also in the room, even though I think the Sanders is going to be a fit, they're just going to be grabbing for carries at each other, and you never want any of that kinds of situations. So unless Miles, which I could see this happening, I could see Miles really separating himself, say, in training camp, and he becomes the RB1 and he kind of takes things over because I think Sanders is a 3-down back. He was my RB2, and I thought he could do a lot in the passing game as well, both with blocking and catching. So I think he makes sense for Philly, and I think Philly would be wise to use him. I just don't know how much that happens in year one with the other backs they have now. So that's kind of a question where I like the fit, I like his potential, but there's not really a definitive right now of whether he's going to necessarily live up to that just because of the other guys that are in the room.
Absolutely, yeah. The one comment I did like, their GM Howie Roseman says, we haven't had a running back like this in years, and this is a guy that, LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook, those are the only other two running backs they've taken in those, high draft slots. So when they had those guys, they rode them to death. We'll see. I'm hoping that's the case. As you said, your number 2 running back. The guy is a beast. So I'm hoping he gets that volume just as a fantasy owner selfishly, but we'll see. And then the last running back, and this is more so for the veteran ahead of this guy, but the Rams also very limited, similar to Chicago in that sense, in draft day capital, yet they still trade up. They select that explosive RB from Memphis, Darrell Henderson, 70th overall pick. So is that a sign that we should be worried about Gurley, or what kind of role is he? Is it just insurance policy? Is he going to be more than that? What do you think?
Well, man, I like the guy that they had on the roster already. I like John Kelly. I was a big John Kelly fan when he was coming out a couple years ago, or 2 years ago. So I was kind of bummed out when they drafted Henderson, just because if Gurley went down, that meant that John Kelly wasn't going to get his shot. But certainly, I think that the Rams want to make sure that they have all the insurance that they need, because and I'll say this, you don't replace Todd Gurley with one guy, right? I mean, like, Henderson's not, it's not like this 1-and-1, oh, Gurley's gone, we'll just sub in this guy that we just drafted. And so I just think that they're doing whatever they can to make sure that they're ready if Gurley isn't ready, or if that knee is worse than we thought or something like that. But even if that is the case, let's say that Gurley goes out of the picture, sure, I think Henderson might be the starter, but I don't think he's getting like Gurley's lion's share of the carries, right? I think they're going to start to split it between 1 or 2, maybe even 3 guys there. So Henderson, I like what he can do. He's got good tape at Memphis, but making a jump from Memphis to the NFL is a tough one to make. I think Kareem Hunt, we're all looking for that next Kareem Hunt, right? The guy who went to the small school, who made the jump, who played right away, who was the full-time back. It just doesn't happen a lot. So Henderson's got a lot of speed. I like his upside there. But even if Gurley goes down, I'm thinking they're going to have him still in a rotation with some other guys.
Gotcha. So out of those running backs, so we've talked about really the 4 big names that I wanted to get to, but is there any others that you thought landed in great spots, or any other sleepers who could make some year 1 fantasy noise?
The sleeper that I have on the top of my head, now things would have to work out in front of him, but if for some reason Benny Snell gets the reins in Pittsburgh, that's my guy. Like, if James Conner even, like, tweaks his ankle in training camp, I'm picking up Benny Snell in like every league, and I'm just gonna wait on it because, certainly James Conner's awesome, and I'm hoping that he's healthy and has a phenomenal year. But if something were to happen to him, when I talk about a replacement guy, a guy coming in, Snell is such a steal at running back, and I think that they will go to him early and often to control games, and he will get them those tough yards. He will run determined, all that kinds of stuff. And so, man, if for whatever reason he ends up getting the ball, he ends up getting the start whenever it is, Benny Snell would be a really good pick.
Does he have the hands and everything too? Like they covet with the Bells and the Connors, how they pepper their passing game with the running back too?
I don't know if he's going to be that strong or that smooth in that area of his game, but I don't think it's going to take away from the fantasy value that you would want out of him anyways. Like that dude's still getting short yardage. He's getting goal lines. He's going to be all of that for you. So that's kind of how I see it.
Gotcha. We'll turn to the receivers, and I do want to start with who your number one guy was. And to quote you, I asked if you were drinking the Kool-Aid on DK Metcalf, and your response was, "Not only am I drinking it, I'm dumping the cooler on my face," which I absolutely love that line. But clearly the NFL was less thirsty than you were, because this guy falls all the way to the end of round 2. It lands in Seattle, which to me was probably the ideal fit, in my opinion, all the way at 64. But what do you think? Why did he fall so far? And is he going to prove these teams wrong? And how do you think the fit is with Seattle?
So I know why he fell so far, and it was because of the neck injury. He had a pretty bad neck injury last year that out for most of the ending half of the year. And teams were worried about it because, I mean, come on, DK Metcalf hurt his neck, and right when he hurt it, people were talking about his career might be over, all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm glad that it's not. Certainly, I think everybody is. But anytime you have that kind of a scare, teams retook a look at his neck, and they're like, yeah, he can play, but who knows in the future, all this kind of stuff. So that's why he fell. Yeah. But on the field, I mean, this guy's a monster. And in terms of the fit, you saying there couldn't have landed in a better spot. I mean, I agree with you, especially if Doug Baldwin's future is as bleak as kind of it was reported during draft weekend, then this guy becomes a stud, right? I mean, he becomes wide receiver 1 in Seattle. And can you just imagine DK Metcalf running 30, 40 yards down the field, Russell Wilson scrambling to his right and trying to find somebody chucking it up there to a giant 6'3", 230-pound monster in Metcalf? I mean, who's stopping that? Nobody. Just get in his area and the dude's coming down with it. So it's just the possibilities of Metcalf and Wilson in the same offense are sky's the limit there. It might take a little refinement. You might get those splash plays. So I'm not sure if people like regularity in fantasy football, right? They like the calculated stuff, being able to be like, okay, I'm getting 11 points from this guy every week. I don't know if Metcalf's ever going to be that guy, but holy cow, he could be a guy who drops off for 30 every now and then. So if you're looking for a boom or bust receiver that you would take preference over, I think DK Metcalf's got to be a guy, especially in that Seattle offense.
I love that. That's the style of player I love to roll into, like my flex too, where maybe he disappears, but it's your flex, so you don't really care. But when he blows up, it just swings you that week. Yep. And I love it too. Russell Wilson, every year gets rated as like the number 1 or number 2 deep passer, and there's nothing this guy does better, DK, than just streaking down the field, going up and getting it. Yep. I mean, we saw Tyler Lockett had 9, 10 touchdowns, and this is like a 5'9", like quick guy. He's got some great ball tracking skills, don't get me wrong, but DK Metcalf is a whole different beast if those two can get on the same page. So I'm thrilled. He's one of my easily top rookies coming in this year. I couldn't be happier. Play action, bomb style offense. Couldn't be better in my opinion. But buzzier than him right now in terms of the fantasy community is N'Keal Harry, and it's kind of understandable, especially in dynasty leagues, landing with the Patriots. And you just got that New England vibe. You get to play with the GOAT and Tom Brady. The team lost a ton of weaponry with Gronk and Chris Hogan and all these guys departing. And this is the first time Belichick's gone out and got a wide receiver in the first round ever since joining the Patriots. So why do you think he went out and saw Harry as his guy? And what do you think is his outlook this year?
Well, that the Patriots also put in an offer for OBJ and for Antonio Brown. So, this move to receiver has been something that they've been trying to do. And so I've got to think that Harry, as their choice ultimately, is going to get a big emphasis on the offense. They're going to give this guy every benefit of the doubt to be their number 1 player. Losing Gronk, it's hard to replace, maybe even impossible to replace. But if Tom Brady gets that chemistry down with N'Keal Harry, especially, like you said, Chris Hogan, and who knows what's happening with Josh Gordon, this is a guy who could get serious looks basically everywhere on the field. 1st and 10, short yardage, goal line, red zone, all this stuff. And so Harry's going to have absolutely every chance to be a monster fantasy player in year 1.
Absolutely, yeah. I love we haven't had a receiver. I'm a Patriots fan, so I'm a little biased, but we haven't had a receiver. I mean, Josh Gordon's somewhat similar, but in terms of the ball tracking and verticality, since maybe Moss, but then you add in the way this guy runs after the catch and the stuff he does that the Patriots love to do with guys like Edelman and stuff. I mean, I'm just thrilled about this fit between him and DK. I don't know which one I'd rather have. Do you have a preference between those two in fantasy if you were drafting today?
I mean, if I'm drafting today, I'm taking N'Keal Harry just because of the consistency of what Brady can do. But certainly, I mean, those are both fun guys to have on your roster.
Absolutely. And my number 3 receiver right now, it's really close between these next two we're going to discuss, but the one I have right now, and especially in light of the Tarik Cohen news, is Mecole Hardman. Is very intriguing, the speed he brings to the Chiefs, playing alongside league MVP of last year, Pat Mahomes, maybe the best deep ball thrower we've seen in a real long time, maybe ever. The guy's arm is just insane, and now might have a very clear path to some serious targets here in the most explosive offense in the league. So I love this fit, but what do you think about Hardman going to the Chiefs?
Certainly makes sense from a fit standpoint, right? I mean, like from the scheme, Kansas City's identity is through their speed, and they picked a pretty damn fast guy with that first pick as an insurance policy for what might happen for Hill. I wouldn't pick him thinking that he's gonna be Tyreek Hill if Hill's not there, but certainly if you're dependent on what happens with this Tyreek Hill situation, if you're doing drafts now, you better handcuff him, because this is the guy that's going to, in theory, play that Tyreek Hill role, because I don't know how much reshaping of the offense they're going to be able to do relative to the success that they had last year. They're going to need that speed element. And I think, again, Hardman's a guy who, boy, if he took on that Tyreek Hill role, would certainly be his most prominent role that he has had in years. Even when he was at Georgia, he was a speed guy, but he was nothing like the usage that we've seen the Chiefs do with Hill. And so it's interesting, but in terms of the skill set and the potential ability, it makes sense because they're kind of a one-on-one connection. Absolutely.
And another explosive weapon, fast guy going to another explosive offense is Paris Campbell going over to the Colts. A great after-the-catch threat. What do you think is he going to bring to this offense that's already pretty stacked, already did some great damage as Andrew Luck worked his way back? What do you think Paris Campbell's going to add here?
Yeah, if you're in a PPR league, draft Paris Campbell, man, because this is, people forget that they just look at the speed, the 40-yard dash time, and they go, oh, this guy's a deep threat receiver. No, he wasn't. At Ohio State, he was the guy that they ran on bubbles and quick wide receiver screens and slants and drag routes and things over the middle. They got this guy the ball in his hands fast, okay? That was his role. That's what's been missing for Indianapolis, okay? They have T.Y. Hilton. He's still going to be the guy to go down the field. He's still going to be the emphasis player. But when T.Y. has been going deep, they've never had the reliant guy who can also hit the home run underneath. Now they do. I think Paris Campbell is going to be a big benefactor over that, and I'd pick him pretty high in fantasy.
Absolutely. And the last receiver I'd like to discuss is Deebo Samuel, just going to an offense that's pretty devoid of weapons. I mean, Dante Pettis had some flashes there with the 49ers, but it's no clear-cut top guy there. Is he a player that could emerge as that, or what do you think he's going to do in a pretty complex Kyle Shanahan scheme? Do you think he's going to fit in pretty well?
Yeah, I think that he's going to have the chance to, and I think that him and Pettis are going to be really interesting utilized pieces, and Deebo's going to have every chance to have a lot of success. I thought the quarterback play was really what held him back at South Carolina, but he was certainly picked where he was because they think his best days are ahead of him in terms of production-wise. So as long as Jimmy G is healthy, I think that you've got a chance to get a little bit of a difference maker in Deebo Samuel, especially talking about how creative Kyle Shanahan likes to get with getting the guys the balls in their hands in the right situations. I think it's smart. I think he could be a good pick as well.
Absolutely. And then the only two tight ends I really want to talk about, because usually year one, there's not a ton of rookie impacts, but this of all years could make a real difference in that. And that's both Iowa boys. We talked about both of them last time you were on, and now we know TJ Hawkinson's going to the Lions, Noah Fant's going to the Broncos here. Those were the first two off the board, and both teams have pretty vacant target shares here. Who do you think is going to have the better fantasy season, better overall season, and what do you see of both of them coming in 2019?
I think that if I had to bet on a fantasy season, I would bet that Noah Fant's going to have the better fantasy season, just because there's a ton of different kinds of options in the Lions offense. It's not just Hawkinson, whereas on the flip side, I think that Denver's offense is going through certainly an identity change right now. And when you look at the quarterbacks they have, Drew Lock and Joe Flacco ahead of him, those are guys who like to take deep chances down the field. But even more than that, I think vertically up the seam with the tight ends to the middle of the field is where they're going to try to attack. I mean, we saw, Drew Lock comes in. We saw him and Albert O'Kay over the last 2 years at Missouri kind of tear it up in that aspect. So you know that he's going to be wanting to target Fant early. Coming from the slot, it's going to be the same story when Joe Flacco's in the game. And so I just think that, Hawkinson got drafted earlier, and I think that they liked him better, certainly. That doesn't mean that he's going to be the better fantasy player year one. And I think that is because there's options there in Detroit, unlike a lot of the options that we're seeing in Denver. And so I would guess that Noah Fant's probably going to have the better fantasy year.
Absolutely. So that's pretty much all the big names I want to talk about. But you have one, maybe two more sleepers that you think landed in great spots that could be a sneaky, like I said, sleeper for 2019 if they get, and they're just not getting any attention really right now.
I think Josh Oliver from the tight end position, man. I thought we heard a lot of GMs talk about Oliver and his potential. One guy was saying this is the easiest transition guy into the NFL. You could just see where he wins so often, and he's going to be a difference maker. I think he's going to be a touchdown guy. So if you're betting late in the draft, you're looking for guys to stash. If you got a deep roster, that tight end position, man, winning that tight end matchup is always so crucial. And if Oliver ends up getting into the mix of getting some serious targets, I think that he's a guy who can really impact some fantasy teams.
Alrighty. Any other last running back receivers, anybody that you want to throw out there as your biggest predictions for 2019?
Oh, you did such a good job asking questions. I don't know if I have some extra
right,
guys.
I got most of the names, right?
Plus, I can't give you too much, right? Because my friends might be listening to this podcast, and I don't want them to steal my guys. So.
I know, that's the worst, right? That's my only thing I don't like about doing the site is when everybody gets all your guys from you. Alrighty, man. Well, that was fantastic. Covered a ton of stuff there with you. So, like I said, 3 times in 2 weeks. If you haven't heard the earlier ones, those are great interviews, and this was fantastic post-draft stuff. Trevor, thanks so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find you and connect?
Yeah, at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter, Tampa Bay, and then TRE at the end. That's the best way to find all my stuff. And writing over at the Draft Network, we're going to be doing a lot of fantasy spin articles when the time comes with a lot of these rookies, looking at their situations, trying to help people out in that area. And so those 2 areas kind of where you can find all my stuff. But I appreciate it, man. I know I've been on a bunch, but like I said, enjoy talking with you.
Absolutely. Did I see that you already did a 2020 mock draft? Am I wrong?
I am a madman and already did a 2020 mock draft. Yeah.
I love it. That's absolutely psycho and fantastic. Good stuff, man. Thanks again, Trevor. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.